in this, I think if we go back to paragraph 5, I just wanted to make sure that we cover the idea of the function of nutrition, because Jung is talking about nutrition as an instinct quite similar to the sexual instinct. So this is going to help him build his idea of libido, which is actually what Freud talks about is libido, but he focuses it more on sexuality. The reason I want to emphasize the function of nutrition is that in therapy, we deal with a lot of people whose instinctual function of nutrition has gone off. They might be anorexic, they might be bulimic, they might have alcohol problems. Their function of nutrition in a way of allowing them to realize about themselves consciously is gone off the instinct. So the instinct for health is gone. I just want to emphasize that because Jung speaks about nutrition here. He also, on the next page, at the end of the paragraph, he talks about eros. And eros is very important, he says, as a creative and procreative force. He's not talking about erotic. He's talking about eros as a creative and procreative force. So I think that is also very important. If we don't have eros, or if we confuse it with only erotic and sexual, then its procreative and creative force is compromised. Does that make sense? The function of eros is really energy for creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. He also goes on in paragraph 6 to say that the psyche is extremely complex structure. So just yesterday, somebody asked me how I would describe psyche. Conscious. Just yesterday. Is it conscious? Is it unconscious? What do you mean by psyche? And here is Jung with his nondescript description saying extremely complex, which means conscious, unconscious, known, unknown, ego, self. It's all psyche. It's not reducible. That's what he's saying. You don't reduce it to sexuality. You don't reduce it to one thing. You don't reduce it to easy. You make it complex and big. I want to go on to, in paragraph 7, he calls the instincts as parts of the psyche. So we have instincts. We have instincts that cause us to eat, to have sex, to relate, to learn, to study, instincts to move. So there are many, many aspects. Jung here is building his case yet again for his view of the personality and the world. And the question we all also want to examine is, as we read this, how does it apply to us now? Because Jung had one way of seeing it, also dependent on culture, on his era, on time of life, and ours is going to be different. Has to be. Anyone have any questions so far? He's just creating stepping stones for us to move from Freudian sexuality, stepping stones, move to the psyche as a complex, many-layered system, many instincts involved, many parts of ourselves. So Jung kind of has to do that because he's separated from Freud. So he's saying, I have a different idea. This is a bigger way of looking at the instincts, looking at psyche, not only sexual. So he doesn't throw sexuality out. He just says it's more than that.
And yeah, I can add, and he tried to find a way to his term collective unconscious.
You are right. And that's exactly what he talks about in the next paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that piece is what is incredibly different from Freudian psychoanalysis, is the collective unconscious and how Jung interpreted that. And he goes over it here, how he discovers that, believes it, etc. But it comes in many of his collected works, that the basis of the difference, or the defining difference, or one of the defining differences, is the collective unconscious. Yeah, I'm glad that
And in every paragraph, he did it step by step to move more deeply for the nature, for the primitive man, and to collective unconscious, fear, and etc.
exactly. So as you were mentioned, so we will go on, and you mentioned primitive man, but Jung speaks about primitive, we'll come to it in a couple of paragraphs, in kind of a way that we want to examine if we were primitive, we might want to question. So let me go on and we'll see. Okay, so here we talks about in paragraph 8, the threshold of consciousness. So what he's saying is that in the unconscious are the things that don't have enough energy to come to consciousness. So do they have not enough energy because they're traumatic, because they are disallowed for one reason or another, because they are personal things that had to be suppressed in the family? Are they collective things that had to be suppressed in the culture? Are they issues that relate to current times, but also maybe historical times, like what we have inherited? It relates to that phrase that Jung speaks about in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, where he asks the question, what is your myth? So that's in the collective unconscious. What myth are you living? What myth are each of us living? What myth are we carrying that maybe we are unconscious of? And Jung is suggesting to us pretty strongly that we find our myth. We find our myth. This is not the personal unconscious. This comes out of the collective unconscious, our mythology. So if you think about it, Jung says in paragraph 8, he talks about when the energy charge is so low, it can no longer appear in consciousness. But though lost to consciousness, it is not lost to the unconscious. So this might be like what we call transgenerational trauma. It's like that. I'm not saying it's the same, but it's like that. So whatever our ancestors have repressed is going to go underneath, and the next generation and the next generation and the next will have that to deal with. That's what Jung is talking about.
Mhm.
And it is very true. We all carry transgenerational issues, we could say. Not just trauma, not just trauma. It would be like some families are, everybody in the family through generations is a musician. This is the same thing that's being talked about. So somewhere it's in the genes, they're all musicians. Or is that what that family promotes, puts out, says this is good, develop that, go to school, study, play an instrument, be in the Bolshoi Ballet. This kind of energy is in the unconscious. It's very powerful. Think about it in your own family history. What are you carrying that is like them and also not like them? And what are you carrying that they repressed? So it didn't have enough energy to come out, gets enough energy through you, and then you can't repress it because you're not supposed to.
I think that it sometimes it can be unconscious because it didn't have a name before.
Yeah. It didn't have a name. Well, you know, if we can look at ourselves, we can look at our dreams, and we could say, don't they reveal what needs to be named? So isn't it true, actually, in all the stories of the world, fairy tales, etc., the issue needs to be named. People
If
come.
we, yes, I agree with you absolutely. But if we know a history of the family, it's more easy. But in our culture, we have a gap family history, and it's sometimes it's very difficult to link dream, emotion, but we don't have a root. We didn't have a root. Family root, family history.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, because also, is that true only of Russian culture? Or
No,
is, oh, no, it's true of many cultures where maybe the personal family doesn't have knowledge of their ancestors. So where are your roots? I mean, that's not uncommon. It's not uncommon in the United States. I'll bet it's not uncommon there either. People don't know how the genealogy back, but you might, in the sense that maybe your talent, maybe you have to guess, maybe your talents are like the ancestors. maybe what you are living out is what they were not able to live out. So what Jung is saying is, be conscious of all those aspects of your psyche, because they might also contain, or probably do, some historical root, some root. And even when you said root, we could also ask, what about those people who can't find any of their roots? And isn't that part of why we go inside to access our roots? Personal unconscious, collective unconscious gives us our roots, even when we can't find them, actually. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyone have a comment so far? Anybody else on this reading? We're on about paragraph 9. So here Jung on paragraph 9 says, he starts to define it a little more. Besides things that have been forgotten, subliminal perceptions form part of the contents of the unconscious. So, you know, maybe you have a dream reminding you of something that happened when you were 10. So it got forgotten. It got put inside somewhere. It's of your personal unconscious. And now it's time to know it. So it will come through a dream. Yeah. So you could say, I mean, think about it. So many things happen to us every single day. We can't remember every single one of them. But the big important ones, or the ones that are carrying a certain meaning, we will remember. They might not be remembered at the moment, but they will come back later. That's why when you have a dream and you go, oh, I forgot all the details, or I forgot that dream, it will reoccur. The theme will come back because it's part of the repressed material that probably has to be paid attention to. And then Jung goes on and he says, when anything falls into the unconscious, it's taken up in a network of associations, which is why, you know, when someone brings a dream or our dream, we say, what do we associate to? What are our associations? I mean, you can look them up on Google. People always do, you know, what does this mean? But it means something when it means something to you. So that's what it means. It's got to have a personal association meaning that makes sense, you know, that makes sense.
First of all, we have a representation, and it's a base which can help us to have association. It may be common association, it may be personal association, but sometimes we have a problem when where this representation isn't constantly.
Well, in other words, are you saying what happens when we can't find our associations? You know, what happens when we have some kind of dream or image or something comes to us or something, and we know it's important, but we don't have associations to, or we don't know. We say, I don't know why I had that dream. Okay, well, maybe you don't know now, you might know in a month. Because you see, the material will stay inside to waiting to be discovered. That's what it's doing there, waiting to be discovered.
I remember one dream of Jung, which he understood only 10 years. Wait.
Yeah. Well, so in relation to that, what about people that have a dream that repeats itself for 10, 5 years? Well, it's, it's meaningful. It's like, why is it repeating? It's telling you, you didn't get the information full enough. So it's going to repeat. So look at how it, yeah.
And
Go-
if you can't understand the meaning of this dream can be repeat and repeat and repeat every time.
Exactly. And so we could say, is it repeating also? Because it's giving you it's going to give you associations that are personal, and it's going to give you collective or mythological or the collective unconscious associations. So the psyche is very kind. It says, come on, this is how you enrich yourself. This is how you get to be more. This is how you get to be more. And even if you think about it, if you don't access, if you're only accessing your personal unconscious, you're missing out, aren't you? I mean, what about the bigger world? What about the meanings of the history, the mythology, the legends of our era way earlier? Those we want to access as well. I mean, I think that's where Jung went. Certainly that's where he went in all of his writings. Yeah, is to gain the energy from that. And that's really what he's saying. Here's the energy, the libido comes from accessing all these layers of the psyche. They're in there. Yeah. It's kind of a vote of confidence of why do the inner work? It's because you discover your own richness. Yeah, and who you are. So Jung goes on in paragraph 11. So he says, the concept of a personal unconscious does not, however, enable us to fully grasp the nature of the unconscious, because he's saying it's more. It's more than personal. So the mother and father are more than the mother and father. They're what they represent. They're what they symbolize. And when you read many other writers, and Jung himself as well, the ability to symbolize is something very important if you're going to understand the psyche. That, if you deal with somebody and it's always concrete, the television is just the television. No, it's probably a way into the world, represents something. Think about it symbolically in a bigger way. And when people can't, they're quite limited and stuck. And they can come to therapy to kind of release the stuckness from the unconscious. And then the river will start to flow, the river of themselves. Yeah. But Jung goes on in the paragraph 11, and he says, he's going to start to talk about the collective unconscious. First, he says mythological fantasies. And then he says, they're elements that don't correspond to any events or experiences of personal life, but only to myths. But I would pose the question that each of us are probably living out a different mythology. So we are going to have experiences of our personal life that are also connected to the mythologies of the world. So the personal is really connected to the collective unconscious. Yeah. So he says, on paragraph 12, where do they come from? Not the personal. He says they come from the brain. So here's Jung kind of introducing us to neuroscience, which it is true, they're in the brain. He differentiates, though, as he goes along in paragraph 12, from they're in the brain, inherited, but the tendency is what is inherited. Not the exact, how does he say? Inherited brain structure. The history we make, he says, a story of mankind, death and rebirth. In other words, we're carrying within us this cycles of life that go on no matter where we live, no matter when we live. There are certain things that are just there. Those are the instincts also. That's the instinct of sex, of nutrition, of love, of relatedness, of life, of death. So he's hooking up that we live a personal life with the fact that we also live a collective existence. It's a big concept, actually. And he says this, the collective unconscious in paragraph 13 means an extension beyond ourselves, which makes our personal life so meaningful, because we are ourselves and we are extended beyond ourselves. So we're more than who we are and more than who we are. Death, he goes on, death for our personal being and a rebirth to a new dimension. You know, in a way, it's very hopeful. It's like if you've had, you know, kind of a heavy issue that you're dealing with, the idea of the cycles of death and rebirth that go on throughout psychologically means you're not going to be stuck in it. It tells you, wait a second, there is a way through. There is a bigger issue involved. And it also says, honor your personal issue, but you don't have to get stuck in it, because this is a collective story that has gone on forever, and you can get through it. Provides hope out of the personal issues. And then he goes on again to differentiate here on paragraph 14. He talks about inherited ideas. Let's see. The collective unconscious forms the dark background against which the adaptive function of consciousness stands out in sharp relief. How would you make sense of that? You know, Jung is not so easy to understand, even though he is, you know, making stepping stones himself for us to understand what is going on. But can you think about what it means? The collective unconscious forms the dark background. Why would he say dark background? Against which the adaptive function of consciousness stands out in sharp relief. Does it make sense to you? Do you have any questions about it? No?
Not very clear for me, this phrase.
No, it is not clear, is it? So in the unclarity, can you make any sense of it? What do you think? What do you think it means? The dark background.
I think about unconscious, about myth, about religious, about ancestors and its background. dark background, our psyche. It's primitive for first vision.
Yeah, we could say the dark background might be all the things we don't know.
It's
So-
nature. It's nature. It's nature level.
Yeah, it's nature level. And consciousness takes from all those places we don't know to try to give it shape and form and to be understood. So a little bit, it's like, to many dimensional. In the background is like a swirling whatever, and then from it comes consciousness, bit by bit. So you could say, maybe you have had this, the experience of a big dream. And if you have that big dream, you don't exactly know what it completely means because it feels like the dark background. And then perhaps over time in your life, you start to unravel what that dream meant when you were, I don't know, years ago, even a child. So children have very powerful dreams, nightmares. And oftentimes that nightmare would be like the dark background. And what are they going to make sense of that as they go through their life? It kind of tells them their life story, if you think about it. The nightmare does. And actually, I think it's former Jungian analyst, he's now dead many years, Hans Dieckmann. He wrote about fairy tales. And I think it was him that said, or von Franz, that the fairy tale that you like tells you about your life story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not, it's not completely, concrete, but it will tell you symbolically about your life story and meaning. And so we could say that the dark background might be what we don't understand. That's coming from the collective unconscious. And consciousness is going to gradually make form of it, make sense of it, bring it forward into our lives. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think it's not only about fairy tales. It's about films and books, your favorite films and books and music.
It's exactly right. True. And so from that, you will see who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of seeing who you are. And that's kind of what Jung is saying. He's saying from the background of the collective unconscious, you will find your particular self. That's what is my myth. What is my myth? Yeah, you see it in your...
It's very interesting to watch sometimes the horror films, because it's like about our unconscious.
It is, but let me ask you in relation to that, is our unconscious only a horror film?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think, yes, it's about, I think it's about art and many, many things.
Exactly. Well, Jung says, and I don't think I went over this enough, but earlier he talks about, he says that the collective unconscious comes alive in the creative person,
Mm-hmm.
feeling itself, just what you say, in the artist, in the inspiration of the thinker, inner experience of the mystic. So there's where the collective unconscious is being revealed. But what if we all are creative? What if you don't have to be an artist to be creative. You don't have to be a writer to be a thinker. You
Mhm.
don't have to be a mystic, but yeah, wouldn't we say we have to dip into all the potential of the personality, which means going into the collective unconscious. It's like going into a world you don't know. That might be what the dark background is referring to. It's a world we don't know. Can't be rational about it, but it has so much energy and so much life force that it's wonderful. That you can't, that in a way, isn't it detrimental to turn away from all the energy in the collective unconscious? And doesn't it make us healthier to tap into it, but maybe not so well if we don't? Yeah, it's powerful. It's powerful.
Mhm.
Bigger than each of us, which is okay.
It seems that the artists, the musicians, the writers, and other people, they're more sensitive, and they can hear collective unconscious.
Okay, let me ask you, that's an interesting point.
Mhm.
Are they more sensitive, or they are able to manifest it beyond themselves? Because there are a lot of people who are very sensitive and they manifest it differently, but they have a high sensitivity.
Mm.
Mm? They might not be artists, but they manifest it in a different way.
Mhm.
Yeah. So somebody might have a garden, or they might cook. They
Yeah.
right? In other words, why I'm saying that is that there is something in what you're saying as well, that the energy needs to be used and transformed. So that really is that's the job of all of us, that in one way or another, we will take this dark background, the collective unconscious, and we will use it because we have to. If you turn away from it, it is disastrous. It doesn't work, right? So once we start to realize it, our responsibility to our life is to use the energy. It's a big responsibility.
It looks like your own way, your own life way.
Yeah, it is your own life way, but you see, the difficulty is that one has to have enough of oneself to follow your own life way. Because the collective will say, this is the way you're supposed to do it, this little way. And if you're on this side of it or that side of it, the collective will say, don't do it. And you will say, I need to. It is my way. And that's what Jung talks about with the process of individuation. It's not so easy. I'm sure you know bunches of people who would say, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Looking at dreams. Why are you studying any of this stuff? Where will it get you? I think it'll get you healthy, but that's just me. And that's what I think Jung is promoting as well. I put words in his mouth, but yeah. And he's also saying it's a very complex process. So in not understanding the sentence about the dark background, that probably is healthy because it leads us to question, what does it really mean? Many people don't live their lives questioning. They just accept whatever's going on rather than question. And the questions will lead to more questions, and it will lead us into the collective unconscious more and more. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have a comment? So I wondered what you felt if we're on paragraph 14 and Jung goes on about primitives and how he says that he implies, he goes on, the European is more civilized, but he also says that the primitive psyche is closer to the world of instincts
Mhm.
and really closer to honoring what is going on of the person in connection to nature, the environment, the world. So he does two things. One is he says, oh, these are primitives, but then he also gives them the credence and the credit of listening to spirit and listening to the animals and listening to the world. So he does kind of two things there. One, he kind of puts the European as above the primitive, but then he also gives primitive people a lot of credit for being able to hear the world in a very close way. I'll give you an example here. On page, where is it? I can't remember where it is exactly, but he talks about the Sioux Indian. Do you remember where he did this? At any rate, so I'm just going to say that because
15.
the 15? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. We're right there. Okay, so when he talks about the Sioux Indian, so the Sioux Indian is in the middle part of the United States. And the Sioux Indian, like many native people, is very connected with spirit, with nature, with wisdom, with a very strong mythology, with a way of looking at the world that is very complex. It involves mandalas, sand paintings, all kinds of cultural richness, which Jung is implying, but I don't know that he's giving enough credit to. Because we could ask ourselves, in all of our education, have we forgotten about our planet? Have we forgotten about the intellect that is connected to the earth, to the ability to sense spirits, to the whatever we call supernatural or occult or not rational, that our world really needs that connectedness to the pieces of the land and the way of being that the Sioux Indian, as example, really has. Like every native culture, it's something that if we are only learning from the intellect and not from the land and not from mythology, and not from history, then we are not learning all we need to learn. And we are not accessing the collective unconscious. So I would say in his example here of the Sioux Indian, what we could say is that, and the primitives, they live closer to the world of the collective unconscious, know how to listen to it. They know how to listen. And listen to the land, you could say. And this is true, every single country. You must have quite similar peoples in Russia, I would imagine, to the, you do, don't you? I don't know. where? In Siberia? There must be, right? Yeah, so we could ask ourselves, why have we lost the connection that they have within their culture naturally? Why? What happened to us? And that is kind of what we need to connect with, is that piece. So Jung brings out primitives, etc. Some of his comments are pretty difficult to manage, hard to manage. But if we look at them and say, well, but this means we need this energy, it's valuable. And it's in our dreams. It's in our dreams. That kind of energy that he calls primitive is in the dreams, and it's in the collective unconscious. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions about what he says about primitives? It's because he's
Is it
talking.
the same that these primitives, maybe nationalities, I don't know, have simpler life without so many problems, maybe like civilization, and that's why it helps them be closer to nature. For example, here in Murmansk region, we've got Sami. It's small nationality who lives more than 8,000 years here in Murmansk, beyond the polar circle. And you know, they believe that you need just a few, you don't need more to be, you don't need much, sorry, you don't need much to live a happy life. You just need just some simple things. And for example, usually they have 2 children in a family. Because if they have no children, someone who had 3 can share a child with them. And they have totally different way of thinking. And they are very connecting with their spiritual life and with dreams. Because sometimes they use dreams to connect with each other from different from different places, not in the same place.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works, but they've got some fairy tales about it.
Yes, well, yeah, and you mentioned, I think that's probably true in every culture. There's always a group that was there many years before and knows how to connect with each other, the land. Is it because, you mentioned something, is it because the life is simpler? Is it because the value system is different? Is it because we have lost connection to the levels of life that they actually are connected with? And isn't it natural to be connected to those levels? And do we get it kind of knocked out of us because of our culture? So when we go to school, if you're going to color the tree and you're 5 years old and you color it purple, the teacher will tell you, oh no, trees aren't purple. But what if they are? So in other words, how do we manifest and how do we perpetuate the creative that is also connected with not just a simpler life, but a life that knows how to honor the spirit, the land, the world? You know, our world now our planet is suffering because we haven't done the right thing. Let me put it that way. And what Jung is bringing out, quite like the people that you're talking about, is that it is possible to live in connection with nature, instincts, the instincts for life that really are valuable and that really can teach us how to be, if only we pay attention. That's the issue. Okay. But let me say to you also, in relation to paragraph 15. So I worked with somebody who was from a native culture and was very offended at Jung's description of primitives and felt very put down by Jung and Jung's ideas about primitives, because you can read it that way as well, without the respect to people who know beyond us or who live differently. And I just say that because there are some paragraphs here that are very offensive to a lot of people. And people are now questioning Jung or Jungian psychology on being only European, we could say. It's very apparent. I don't know, when you read chapter 50, or the paragraph 15, if you felt that way, but maybe because I had experience with this person, I could really read into this kind of a place that really is not about individuation in a sense, but puts people in a category of less than. Yeah. So I just want to bring that out because he continues it as we go on in the next paragraph. He talks about the powerfully developed layers of the primitive psyche. It's toward the end of paragraph 16. He says these layers form the collective unconscious. The layers of the primitive psyche, together with the vestiges of animality that loose themselves in the nebulous abyss of time. It's really, I mean, in a way, it's a beautiful sentence, bringing in animals of the abyss of time. It's like it can go on forever. And these are many layers of the primitive psyche. He says they're developed. But then he goes on and he goes on in paragraph 18 with rather a tremendous diatribe in a way for the Aryan European. I want to point this out because I think that we need to realize that Jung had a shadow, and we want to be aware of the shadow in Jungian psychology and how we carry it, how we project it, what we do with it, how we honor the shadow and how we don't. Yeah. Did you have any thoughts about his issues with primitives?
I think we are very often forgot how long history had a human psyche.
Yeah. How long? How many years? Is that what you're saying? Can you say it again?
I say that if we think about the power of our psyche, we are very often forgot about how long time. Так, как сейчас я уже устала. Как долго, how long time history our psyche had.
Exactly. And Jung speaks in two ways here. On the one hand, he's saying the primitive psyche is very old. and goes way deep inside and has many layers and has been going on forever. And it's a question, is it up to us to contact that part of our nature as well, so that we are able to live in relationship to the world and in relationship to the many layers of the unconscious, and not have to push it away. I think the example that you gave, Svetlana, about that group of people, they're not pushing away the unconscious. They are living with it. They're living with it. So it's a different way of doing it. And it's also, I think, quite different from how people live in whatever we call civilized cultures, where many will denigrate the unconscious and not pay attention to what is going on unconsciously. And Jung is very clearly saying, this is a valuable level of life and where we live and how we live, and pay attention, because it's a guidepost. It's a guidepost. You know, when Jung says somewhere, you know, when you're stuck or you're lost, ask for a dream. Ask for some kind of synchronous event. Look in your world to try to find the guideposts, because they're there. They're there. And that's the collective unconscious also. And just going back, there's where our roots are, within us as well. The roots lie inside also. Anyone have a last comment, because we're almost out of time? Anything? Let me just say one thing before we stop. On paragraph 19, and then we will continue from 19 next time. And we have to figure, and the time we are going to have next time will be 5:30 your time, right? If that's okay.
Mhm.
It's okay? All right, thank you. But just one thing, in paragraph 19, Jung talks about the importance of living within one's body, in your body, in relationship to your body, in relationship to your physical existence. The reason I mention that is that, again, too often we leave off the importance of the body in analytical work, and it's very important. It's not just meant to be up here. We're supposed to feel it all the way down. And if you don't, you can tell something's going on, because all the layers are also physical layers. They're not just layers of the psyche, of the mind, they're also layers of the body. So we get to understand ourselves in many ways. Okay. Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
2
Thank
weeks,
you very much.
5:30 your time.
Yes, I say. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.